Alright, if I was to put a title on this video, it would be called Why I Do Not Play the Dutch Defense. This game was played in Las Palmas, 1993, between former FIDE world champion Russian Grandmaster Alexander Khalifman, who was rated 2630 at the time, and the younger Veselin Topalov with the black pieces, whom at the time, along with Vladimir Kramnik, used to play, believe it or not, the Dutch defense. And this game is one of the reasons why I do not particularly like the Dutch defense. And of course, it's only one game, and you can probably tell who the winner is by the way I'm talking. But honestly, the Dutch defense a lot in tournaments, and the Dutch. I had a love-hate relationship with the Dutch defense for a long time because although I did have a few spectacular wins and some nice results, I also suffered some dreadful losses because that's the nature of the defense. It's a risky defense, and it borders on being unsound due to the fact that you weaken your king side so early. You know, you're taking that chance, and you're basically burning bridges early too because you're staking out an attack on the king side. But that's not even the reason why I gave up the Dutch defense. What it was is that most Dutch players want to play in an aggressive style, and the thing is, there are so many anti-Dutch systems that white can play, whereby you can get a decent position that you basically it feels like you're not even playing the Dutch anymore because there's so many gambits. For instance, after D4, right? F5, the Dutch proper. There's your main line stuff like, after C4, knight F3, etc. like that, and G3 and bishop G2 and all that stuff. There's so many anti-Dutch lines. There's bishop G5, which is extremely annoying. For instance, after knight F6, sometimes black just simply snatches the bishop off. This is like akin to the Trompowsky attack. Then, if black tries to avoid the early bishop swap by playing, say, G6, then you get all of these gambit continuations with E4 or knight C3. Again, very dangerous stuff. Of course, if you do that, this is all well known. Again, with these type of continuations, and then of course if mate, so all stuff that you have to keep in mind and prepare for. What else? There's even Queen D3. I forgot what the name of this thing. I think it's called the Alapin Gambit. Queen D3. There's just a lot of stuff, and of course there's your Staunton Gambit, which is pretty routine. Then there's G4. There's many anti-Dutch systems. H3, then G4. So you get what I'm, you get the point that I'm trying to make. There's a lot of just anti-Dutch systems. So if a player doesn't want to go into those main lines, for instance, your typical, just, your typical friendly, Dutch lines. That looks normal, right? The normal Leningrad setup. You get all of this type of stuff, and the thing is these lines could be pretty dangerous, especially this one. These lines could be pretty dangerous, and grandmasters play these lines, so it's not like you can just brush them off. If you play the Dutch as black, you have to kind of be ready for this stuff, or you'll lose real quick in 20 moves. So that's part of the reason why I stopped playing the Dutch because I wasn't getting the positions that that I wanted to play, which were those king side attacking chances that I saw in a lot of these a lot of great Stonewall games and Dutch games. Matter of fact, if you look at the World Championship in 1951 between Botvinnik and David Bronstein, which ended in a draw, unfortunately, I felt Bronstein was the stronger player that year. And anyway, I have my own opinions about that match. But anyway, if you look at that match, you'll see the Dutch has played in many games in that match, back and forth. That's like the last World Championship match where the Dutch defense is featured at the top, the top levels. So if you don't like playing against anti-Dutch systems, then one suggestion is you can play, instead of F5 right away, you can play the move E6, right? And then after C4, then go into the Dutch. Now already the problem with that is that if the problem with that move, so as you can see, the problem with this move right here, E6, well, it's not a problem, but you're not guaranteed, C4 or knight F3. Your opponent could play E4. So now you got to be willing to go into the French defense, or be willing to play Owen's defense or something like that, or some obscure opening. So with all of that said, why I don't play the Dutch defense, besides it being a very risky defense that offers small chances of winning. Maybe at the lower levels. I mean, maybe at the lower levels, and I mean real lower levels too, like below 2,000. But anyway, so this game between Alexander Khalifman and Topalov went D4, F5 was played, and you guessed it, anti-Dutch system, knight C3. Forget about C4 and other slow methods. Khalifman goes straight for the juggler. Knight C3, already challenging and threatening to play E4. This kind of forces Black's hand in the matter. D5 to stop the E4, because one of the main ideas of F5 is to control E4 with the iron grip, like playing F4, knight F6, and in some lines you have D5 initiating a stonewall. So knight C3 aims to cross those plans immediately by getting an early E4 in. So Black is taking great chances to control E4. After all, he's weakened his king side on the light squares severely. So for him just to lose control over E4 like that is makes his opening quite dubious. So D5 clamping down on E5. This is a stonewall now. So basically, White has been forced. If White has kind of forced Black into playing a stonewall defense. Now, just to give Black a little credit here, White's position isn't spectacular here. I mean, the knight really probably usually doesn't belong on C3, because we know in these queen's pawn games that this pawn on the C pawn belongs in the fight, involved in the fight for the, so it's a trade-off. However, the way I look at it is Black's Black's weaknesses are a little more of a static nature than White's. In other words, this knight can be moved in somewhere, and then perhaps with the tempo later on, and then C4 can be played, and that problem can be rectified quickly. Where it's harder for Black to get this E5 advancing or deal with these weaknesses around the king. Khalifman played bishop F4. a natural move, and also indicating his intention to castle on the queen side. So now already black has to be mindful of moves like knight to b5 with the idea of taking on c7. Knight f6. Again, we see black's idea of dominating the e4 square. e3, natural looking move. There's c6, knight f3, and g6 is played. e6 is playable, but black decides to fianchetto the bishop. Bishop d3. Where else to put the bishop? Bishop e2 is possible. Bishop d3, I'm not impressed by that too much, but he's developing the piece. This position is closed, and so the development of the piece is kind of like, it's hard to find out where exactly the pieces should go. So maybe a move like a4 or even rook b1 here is possible, with the idea of playing against this Carlsbad structure with b4, b5, etc. So bishop d3 was played, not bad. Bishop g7, castles. Knight e2, and there's the idea that I mentioned earlier. See how easily white can rectify the problem of the c pawn. So he drops the knight. Knight comes into e4, big deal, c4, and now that pawn is where it's supposed to be immediately. All right, so after c4, king h8, getting off this potentially dangerous b3 to g8 diagonal. Bishop e5. This is a good strategic idea, as we see all of the pawns, or most of black's pawns, are on light squares. It makes sense that with the compromised king side to get rid of the dark square bishop. And with all those pawns on light squares, the dark squares will definitely become weak or weaker with the removal of the dark square bishop. So e6, and furthermore, bishop is his quote-unquote good bishop, even though it's not too active. That's his better bishop. The c8 bishop is a bad bishop, locked in behind the light square pawns. That's one of the downsides of the stonewall defense, is the weakness on the dark square e5 and the dark squares in general, the bad bishop on c8. b4. So now we see a combination of plans here with the idea of b4 and b5. Exchanging on c6, opening up the c file, and then piling up on the weakened pawn that will result on c6. So let's see how black fights against this plan. So now Topalov plays knight d6. And he's sort of threatening to win a pawn by playing d takes c5, but it's not a real threat. Khalifman simply gets rid of the dark square bishop, and we can see, and already in 12 moves, that white is substantially better. Play on the queen side is considerably advanced already, with b4 and c4 played, and control of the e5 square has been established. And meanwhile, black has no counterplay going on the king side as of yet, and his pieces on the queen side are still undeveloped. And this is only after 12 moves. The dark square bishop has been taken away, his best bishop, and he's left with a bad bishop. This is definitely a position where knights prevail over bishops, my friends. It's a closed position, and this position is definitely better for knights. Meanwhile, black does have a threat to take on c4. So therefore, queen b3. And this has a dual purpose, not only to protect the pawn on c4, but also to continue the attack on the queen side, which is white's main plan in this position. Knight d7, a4, queen f6, and of course, one of the plans for black is to try to get in the advance e5. Very difficult because of the pressure that's on the d5 pawn from the c4 pawn, and that's why in these queen's gambit type positions, the pawns on d4 and c4 and that queen's gambit setup is very important to put pressure on the black center. If this pawn on c4 was sitting at c2, then it would be a no-brainer for black to try to achieve e5. But now, in order to achieve e5, he has to worry about the exchange coming here. So Khalifman exchanges first. Now, he had other options. He could have waited. He could have played a move like knight f4 or even b5. But he decides to clarify the position. And after e takes d5, he simply plays b5. Again, putting pressure on the queen side and attacking on the queen side. Now, black is supposed to be generating an attack on the opposite wing in order to slow white down, but he's not doing a good job of generating any meaningful play right now. So the knight hops back into e4, rook ac1. We see the build up on the open c file, and again you see this same idea in the queen's gambit decline, specifically the exchange variation. This is one of the main ideas. It's play b4, b5, exchange on c6, and then the pawn on c6 is attacked. So queen d6 is played, and now queen c2. Not only piling up against the c pawn and threatening to win the pawn now, but also in case of, say, a move like, for instance, a bad move like that, f4, then we simply capture there, and plus this would be totally exposed. So the move has several good points to it. So rook f6, and black is totally on the defensive again, having trouble developing, and just basically you're being dominated positionally here. Rook fd1, now a6, knight f4, continuing the positional dominance. Finally, at move 20, we see the move h6, and still there's nothing that can really be done here. If black can move again and play g5, but for the time being, he at least keeps a knight out of g5, say after bishop takes or something like that. So h6, queen b2. I always talk about this in my videos, is opposing opponent's pieces. So we can see right here, the king is here, queen is on b2. It's a good strategic move. Also, white doesn't mind if black captures, because his pawn structure will be twisted. King h7. Topalov knows the rules. He gets off of that. He gets out of that opposition with the queen. See, because you might say to yourself, "Hey, nothing's going on right now," but in the future, the position might open up, and next thing you know, that king's on g7, queen's on b2, and the piece is pinned, and next thing you know, You lose the game. So after king h7, knight e5, very powerful move. Why? Is because the knight cannot be exchanged at this moment. If knight takes e5, then pawn takes e5, forking queen and rook. So Topalov just merely has to accept that the knight is there. And notice the contrast of the two knights, the one on e5 and e4. And this is often arises in these stonewall type positions where black is not able to boot the knight on e5 off, right, without a trade. Therefore, if he trades, often a pawn will appear as a wedge in the formation. Whereas white usually has a move f3 that he can just kick the knight out. And then usually is able to follow up if he has to with e4. So, here's some tactics now. And usually, word to the wise, if you're in a worse position, usually the tactics don't work in your favor. That's like a general rule of thumb. And here that rule of thumb proves to be accurate. So, knight ec5 with the idea that if d takes e5, well, queen takes e5. Queen takes e5. Knight takes e5. And black has some glimmer of hope, right? Has something to look forward to. And perhaps can hold the position and draw. However, Khalifman is a strong grandmaster, and he saw the idea, and he simply played rook takes c5. And Topalov resigned here. Why did Topalov resign? Because after knight takes c5, the game is over, right? So first of all, for the exchange, white gets two minor pieces, right? And then he gets a continued attack. So for instance, if queen takes c5, then knight g4. Again, look at the unprotected pieces. You got the rook here, unprotected. Queen, unprotected. So move like knight g4 is very strong. Then rook f7. These are just sample moves. Again, Topalov had resigned. So rook f7 and then knight f6 check. And that's all she wrote. There's no safe place for the king to go. And notice it's only fit that the game would end up like that, with the missing dark square bishop and white basically making black pay the price for the early weakening of the king side. And only is fitting that he would have end up with a position like that. Again, Topalov had resigned. Now if queen f8, then simply just b takes, and then white would continue his plan and penetrate on the queen side, either with rook b1 or just queen b6. So the game would be over. So I think it's a fitting title for this video, Why I Don't Play the Dutch. So, and it's probably, if you ask Kramnik and Topalov why they gave up the Dutch, they probably have some similar reasons as to why they don't play the Dutch either. Because again, after forcing black into a stonewall, he might be a Leningrad player, but now he's forced to play a stonewall. And then just putting all the pawns on the light squares like that, this is just not a winning type of chess strategy that you want to have. This type of position is just just asking for trouble from the black side, and that's what happened. You see, white setup is real modest here, but He's just able to just totally demolish. He totally demolishes Topalov with some simple ideas like trading off the dark square bishop, leaving the light square bishop bad. Um, I gotta go through the game again. Did that light square bishop even move off c8? Let me see. Just the easy attack on the queen side. Yeah, that bishop didn't even move off of c8 or the rook on a8. Wow, yeah. He resigned after that. That's amazing. That's incredible. Yeah, that bishop or rook in a8 didn't even move. Wow. But yeah, like I said, the Dutch, like I said, to each his own. Maybe in like splits, but I don't know who would enjoy playing positions like that as black. Then that's one of the reasons why I gave up the Dutch is just having. I have several positions like that. I remember playing Asa Hoffman, and maybe I'll show that game. I lost in like 20 moves. Something. Again, I'm not blaming the opening, but it's just that the type of positions that arrive in our game. I remember it was something like that. I have to look. It was many years ago. I have to remember it was something like this: Bishop G5, G6, because I wanted to avoid this, and I was a Leningrad player at the time, so I was trying to get to a Leningrad, and I'm not sure if he played E4 or E3. He might have played E3, Bishop G7, and I think we wound up in it's something like this, something like this. Yeah, it was a crazy game. I had to look it up, but it was just not what I was looking forward to playing. I mean, I was defending, my weaknesses on the king side. As you can see already, it's already a dangerous position. So again, that's my take on the old Dutch defense. So I'm gonna do another video on a couple of openings, basically why you don't see them at grandmaster level too much. So anyway, like, subscribe. Hope you enjoyed that. I hope you learned something. See you on the next.